Brendan Badley just to step up, and he'll be introducing all his members of his panel. So he doesn't walk up by himself, let's give him a round of applause.
Can I ask the rest of the panelists to come up as well, please?
We've got everybody here now. We lost one panelist. Can do. Well, huddle up. So I think that was quite a nice segue now into our panel session. You've had your 101 in terms of those of you that weren't up to speed on DLT. I was thinking that we managed to steer clear of the B word for most of the day today, at least the blockchain one. But you'll have plenty of chance to get into that later on, obviously, with some of the panellists that we have here. But Herbie had asked us to obviously start with an execution piece and then run all the way through to settlement. So that's how we'll approach this particular panel. But first, if I may ask each of my panellists maybe to give a brief introduction of themselves and their reason for being here, as it were.
Hi everybody, reason for being here, Herbie's a great friend, he asked me to come to the panel and that's why I'm here.
I was thinking more about your company actually.
I work for a company called Digital Assets, a software company, and it's pioneering the use of smart contracts.
I work for a small company called IBM in the vertical financial markets, having a broad cross-technology view of financial markets.
I'm also here because I know Herbie, and I'm delighted to come and help support him. I work for Settle, and we do financial market infrastructure in the post-trade space using 21st century technology.
So if we look at the way financial markets have developed over the last 10 plus years, what I suppose we've really seen is an arms race with respect to execution speeds. Latency has gone further down, you've got through to the point of microwave technologies now. And I think what we'd like to do first is actually touch on that to see where are we currently in that world, and do we actually think that there's more to be sucked out of it? And given the fact that Chris, from your experience at Radiance, maybe you could give us a view from the pipes and where latency plays a part there, and perhaps Peter, given your experience at Chi-X, then you can look at it from the algorithmic point of view and where they can actually get some more piece from there.
So thanks. So Radiance, what was Radiance is a company that I helped set up back in 2000. So it's actually a long time ago now. The challenge there was, how do you leverage a community of interest, which was actually Reuters' community of interest, and how can you take advantage of that? And the idea at the time was these milliseconds matter. How can you make trading faster? And I'm at the heart of it, I'm a sales guy. So the selling process of the Radiance proposition wasn't actually that difficult, because you'd go to some of these hedge funds and you would say to them, you can actually get into the market before the price changes on your Bloomberg or your Reuters screen. And so some of this was just literally order taking, because low latency enabled people to get ahead of the marketplace. Milliseconds mattered. And I think the context that I'm guessing Herbie's looking for here is that back in 2000, it was 20 years ago, people were really focused on low latency. They were focused on the front office. The conversation, I really enjoyed the previous speaker, it was a great tee up for what we're discussing now. But there was a huge investment then in the front office. The front office was sexy, that's where all the money was being made. The back office was not quite so sexy, and people didn't really care so much about it. And so where you were spending a fortune on this low latency technology for the front office to give you milliseconds matter, nothing was happening in the middle and the back office. And so even as the systems grew, the best solution was, well, we'll just throw more people at it. We'll offshore it. We'll throw more people at it. And that got us to a situation where, post the crisis, where everybody's costs were out of control, they built a cost structure which just was not sustainable. And then along comes this technology to the blockchain stuff, smart contracts, and all of a sudden people realise that there is perhaps a better way of doing this, and there's a better way of automating and improving the efficiency. So I think in short, it's, we've really spent a lot of money and a lot of time and effort automating the front office. The mid and back office didn't have that. And then so around 2014, 2015, along comes this technology that allows the transformation of the mid and the back office. Let me pause there because Peter spent a lot of time in this space. Peter, over to you.
Chris, thank you. I think one of the starting points that I'd judge to be important, really very simply, is the mid-1990s and the establishment between Salomon Brothers, Fidelity and Instinet, who I used to work with, of a working group to set up something that became fixed protocol. Because it was only really when people could express things using a standardized messaging set that they could actually start to make things go quicker. Prior to fixed protocol, you were actually tied into the APIs or the connectivity options that were offered by each of the individual exchanges. And the individual exchanges, surprisingly enough, all had slightly different order entry processes. So it was very difficult to go quickly because there was a whole series of different messages that needed to be translated. So that's, I think, a first important part about how it was, in a way, that the front office became the dominant partner. That's the first part. The second part, which is very often misunderstood, but I think is, in fact, probably slightly more important, and certainly I'd say today is of crucial importance, is a change that took place around about that sort of time, around about the late 1990s, the early part of 2000, in the arcane science of actuarial calculations. So back in the day, actuaries would calculate indices or calculate performance usually based around a country-specific model. And your benchmark was the FT 100 or it was the FT 350 or whatever else, but it was based around an individual country set. As changes in asset management, as asset management became international, the actuaries looked at things and changed them from being country-specific, ladies and gentlemen, to being sector-specific. So no longer did you necessarily have to transact your business only through the LSE, because you were now looking to buy, for example, European telcos. That would be just as much BT as it would be just as much France Telecom, as it would just as much be any of the other Telefonica or any of the other names. So you now need to look at things in a different way. Step forward the standardization, the fix enabled, and you can see how we got to where we are. Now, the corollary of that, and I think is of crucial significance to where we are today, the corollary of that is that pretty quickly after that, people began to do the numbers and work out that people actually, can I really trust active stock selectors? And we've seen this massive growth over the last little while in index funds. When do index funds want to trade? They want to trade on the close. And why do they want to trade on the close? Because then they know that they get the absolute best closing auction price. So markets that are open, 6, 7, 8 hours a day, actually the majority of the transactions now, a very large proportion of them, go through in the last 15 minutes. That's a big change. Now these things I think are going to happen, to Chris's point, I think these things are going to play through now, exactly correctly, into thinking about, well, how we've made the front end more efficient, but we still pump it out the other end, and it goes straight to COBOL on mainframe. Great. COBOL on mainframe. Step forward. IBM.
So gives you the opportunity, Soren, rather than COBOL mainframe, but the view then, of course, is front office sexy. Let's start looking at what's happening with the back office, because really it's got to play catch up from a risk perspective, post-trade risk. How do you look at the scenarios of what could potentially be there, particularly systemically important institutions, how do you get to a point where back office actually catches up with front office speed?
Mhm.
So the initial starting point for that, though, I think was more a focus on how can we cut costs with respect to the mid and back office, as opposed to how can we make it more efficient. And so perhaps maybe we'll take that segue to you.
I'll
Sorry,
take that segue, yes. True, yeah. Front office sexy, back office costly. So where we saw a trend, which Chris alluded to, about let's offshore the back office, let's make it cheaper. There wasn't really much innovation in the back office happening. You had attempts to neutralize or attempt to trying to neutralize the technology, which basically was yet another just another cost-cutting exercise or an attempt to do so. Fundamentally, however, you weren't changing anything. You weren't changing the technology, you weren't changing the processes, you were just making it cheaper. And yes, we now have an evolution of technology. We're talking about blockchain, but AI and other technologies that will help the processing. But still, I think history shows ourselves a few things, or shows a few things. One, financial markets companies working together is very, very difficult. So on the mutualization side, companies working together, there aren't many successes. There are a few, of course, but mainly there's a whole ocean of failed attempts to do so. Secondly, we are actually not changing the processes as such. So when we're hearing the former speaker talking about moving to T plus 0, it's still on the same processes. If you look at the STO issuers, they still have an exchange, they still have a clear, they still have the same structure. They might collapse it, but we're just replicating the existing. We're not fundamentally changing the way the industry operates. Yeah?
And so now we've moved forward through to a period where we have huge amounts of data. So data's been touched on a few times over the course today. But the key piece with data, of course, nowadays is really use of cloud to be able to either store, distribute, utilize, whatever the way you want to put it. However, we're still in a situation where large financial institutions are somewhat paranoid about their usage of cloud. And so just wondered whether the panelists had some views on where they see cloud adoption going. And that would be our segue then into obviously some of the back office pieces.
Mm-hmm. So cloud, we've been talking about cloud for probably 15 years. And it was an exciting technology when it first came out, and everybody was very, very scared about it. I don't work for a cloud company, I don't want to sell you cloud, but if you don't have a cloud strategy right now, and your firm doesn't have a cloud strategy right now, which is pretty aggressive, you should probably think about switching employers, because it is the future of how you're going to be managing data. There's so much data. Data is integral to the running of your business, and you've got to think about efficient ways to do that. Back in the day when people first started talking about cloud, and I used to work for Swift, I was the CEO of Swift for the Americas, and our CTO was like, no, absolutely not, we're going anywhere near it. Now you can't afford to be running a business without a cloud strategy. Why? Because just what it does to the economics of your business is just profound. And secondly, there isn't one person in this room that doesn't worry about security, either your personal security of data or your company's security of data. And it's very, very difficult for you, unless you are a huge company, it's very difficult for you to put in place the security measures that the likes of Amazon, Microsoft, IBM, Google, etc. can put in place. So just from a scale perspective, like it or not, cloud is here to stay. Cloud is a big part of the future. And perhaps just jumping to maybe a little bit of what we're going to do later on, cloud is one part of what I see as a mashup of technologies. Cloud is a way to house stuff, so you can take these technologies we've been talking about, smart contracts and DLT, put them on-prem, which is what a lot of you will have been used to, or you can stick them in the cloud. Cloud will converge with AI, cloud will converge with blockchain, DLT, smart contracts. Why? Because if you think about what a DLT and smart contracts give you, it's arguably a shared source of truth in a structured format, in a synchronized way, and what you're going to see is the merger of DLT platforms being a font to feed these machine learning algorithms and applications which will all reside in the cloud. So fast forward 5 years from now, maybe we can debate about the time, 5 or 10 years from now, we won't even be having this conversation. It'll be 90% of what you do will be in the cloud, and DLT platforms will be feeding machine learning applications that are making good use of the analytics and the data that is essential to run your business. Let me just pause there.
Yeah, if I comment on it, we've just invested a massive amount of money on buying a Red Hat, which is a cloud enabling company. I totally buy into the cloud strategy that Chris mentioned. It's a matter, for me, it's a matter of what type of cloud, and certainly with the Red Hat acquisition, we enable our clients to have a completely hybrid cloud approach. So some applications you can put in a public cloud, some application you can have in a private cloud, and some applications you can have on-site, as well as you can have your data on-site. And the technology, the Docker technology that Red Hat gives us, basically enables you to move your applications from the infrastructure all the way through the public cloud. What we do see, however, is a slight shift, and that was one thing that came out at Cybus last week from some of the challenger banks who have been completely born in the cloud, that they were thinking, or were actually, some of them actively saying, we'll keep our applications, and we've started everything in the cloud, but now we actually want to control our data. So we're taking data into our own data centers, but leaving the applications in the cloud. Now that's GDPR reasons, but it's also that you want to have much more control and flexibility on your cloud provider as well. So by having the hybrid cloud approach, you also reducing the dependence that you have on a single cloud provider. So previously, if you put everything into one type of cloud, that was your cloud pretty much forever. Now we see much more a multi-cloud approach between multiple vendors, so you lose a little bit that dependency, and you have more flexibility, and the technology is there to facilitate that. So like Chris, for me, the question is not cloud or not, but it's what type of cloud that you're.
Two really quick points. The first one is I think it's really important to distinguish between data and information. They're not the same thing. Data and information. I think about that quite a lot, because that informs quite a lot of how you do things. I entirely agree that the right place to go is to do these things in the cloud. We run regulated services now in the cloud very successfully, and they're great. The other point I want to make, be very nice to IBM now, after being very rude. I think it was the case, I think it was Thomas Watson, I'm not sure, but I think it was Thomas Watson who immediately after the war famously quoted as saying that we've done a lot of studies and we've thought about this an enormous amount, and we conclude that the global market for computers is 5. Google, Azure, IBM, the other cloud providers. That's your 5, ladies and gentlemen.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe he was right. I don't know. I just leave that as a thought.
I just build on just a couple of the comments that were made. We've been talking about cloud, and that's been buzzing around for sort of 15 years or so. And you just heard the word flexibility was used, and another word I would use is choice. one of the things that people want in the 21st century is they want choice. They don't want to be locked into a vendor. They've seen that before. They've watched that movie. They want choice. And what you're seeing now is the cloud providers have matured their offering. You've got choice. You can go put stuff in an Azure cloud, an Amazon cloud, an IBM cloud, and you can switch them. And that is a very important shift in what's been going on in the cloud strategies. The reason I wanted to draw that out is because we are probably 5 to 10 years behind in the blockchain, DLT, distributed ledger technologies story. But one of the things that will change, and is already starting to change, is that the buyers of these want choice. They don't want to be locked into a particular platform. No different from when you're having the VHS Betamax debate, you know, which one's going to survive? Well, in terms of a platform to a DLT platform, if any of you can tell me which one is going to be the one that's going to survive and be the best one, good luck. And I really would quiz you on, are you really sure about that? And nobody really knows where this is going. So you want to have choice. And there's a bunch of really good platforms out there right now who do a really good job. But as Ruth was saying, you know, you're seeing people like Facebook come into the story. The huge technology companies have realized, excuse me, the transformational power of this technology. I'm talking about DLT and blockchain and smart contracts. And with that, you're going to see the emergence of the names that Peter mentioned, you know, IBM, Amazon, Google, Microsoft, all coming in with their offerings. And which one's going to win? Which one's going to be the right one? Nobody really knows. But what is key is that we're now seeing a shift in the way that these technologies are being dispensed, and some of the technologies that complement them, such as smart contracts, that will allow you to take an application, build an application using a smart contracting language, put it on even a traditional database, just either an Amazon database or a traditional database, and you can build this using smart contracting technologies such as DAML, which is the technology that my company uses. You can build these applications, and then you can say, you know what, I'm not ready to put it onto a DLT platform just yet, either because I don't think the technology is mature, or I don't want to take that business risk. Then you say, you know what, I'm ready to make this multi-party application, and I'm going to put it onto a particular platform. What people want, just as they've wanted in the cloud space, is they want to be able to say, you know what, I put it on that platform, say platform A. Well, platform A may not be the answer in 5 years' time, either for commercial reasons, or for technology reasons. So they want to be able to take that application that they've built and be able to port it onto another platform with minimal hassle. The reason I draw this out is because it's similar to what we've seen in the cloud story. It's what we're starting to see now, and it's one of the ways that the barriers are being broken down for the adoption of this technology. Because a lot of people are saying, what platform do I use? Do I put it on this platform? Geez, I don't know. And, you know, I honestly don't know which is the best platform. And so people want choice, just as they're getting in cloud. And we're going to see more and more of that happen with this DLT technology.
So the only thing, if I can just come with a very, very quick comment. Whilst you have that multi-cloud flexibility from vendors, different vendors, I think the regulators are guiding you in the sense that they will say, well, certain in financial markets, and you can see that there's not many applications that are in public cloud. So irrespective of the cloud vendor, I think the regulators are pushing you more into your private cloud space. Yeah? But you still have that flexibility of
private cloud, but even so, the choice to move from private cloud from A
exactly.
vendor to B
exactly.
vendor. And that is an essential part. And if you're looking at deploying DLT technologies, you should be making sure you're using technologies that give you that sort of choice. It's what happened in the cloud, it's what's going to happen in the DLT space, and quite frankly, you know, people didn't buy IBM because, you know, for all those reasons, they've heard that story. I wouldn't buy into a DLT solution unless I knew there was choice. Why? Because the technology is still relatively new, and you need to be able to, oh, this was the right decision today, but it may well not be the right decision tomorrow. Give yourself choice in that buying process.
So,
no, fine. So just to answer to your question, your point there, Soren, is that even though you're suggesting it's going private, our regulator here in the UK, of course, has gone public cloud ahead of everybody else. So they're happily putting all their data through AWS, even if the banks don't want to do that. So we've been trying to...
Even if the banks are pulling their data out of AWS for many reasons.
So we've been trying to get a skirt around the elephant in the room for a while, but we keep on coming back to DLT and blockchain. So Peter, maybe if we if we use the Gartner curve as our analogy, where is it that DLT and blockchain actually sits now within the Gartner curve?
Maximum height, I think they described it as, didn't they? Simon Taylor grew a bit more beard and said, yep, it must be maximum height. It's just wrong. All right? I just don't think that makes any sense at all. I think we're at a plateau. I think that there's an absolute very interesting dimension starting to evolve, which is the sort of dimension that we saw from DTCC a little while ago. We certainly saw it from SWIFT a little while ago. We've certainly seen it from Euroclear. We've seen it from a number of people who say, oh, blockchain's a really good thing and we should really do it. We should do it. Yeah, okay, that's fine. These are the people, the incumbents, who really believe that they can make a change. And yet the history of innovation, particularly in financial services, is that it isn't very often the incumbents that make the change. It's the challenger that makes the change, and then the incumbents adopt and adapt to it. So I don't think that a DTCC-led blockchain initiative, even on the Gartner hype cycle, I don't think that necessarily is going to make the world change. I suspect that the world changes because of two things. One very, very simple thing, which is that the price comes down. The price has got to come down a very long way. To go back to the opening comments that Chris and Soren made, one of the sort of pieces that I think is most often misunderstood, most often not discussed, is the sort of sociology within a bank or within an institution or within an exchange or a platform or something else. And the institutional sociology is that there's all these heavily educated people with lots of degrees and lots of social contacts and social skills and all the rest of it, who all work in the front office and all think of themselves as being incredibly important. And most times, that's fine, because most times there is so much money being made in the front office that it doesn't matter what goes on in the back office. And the relationship between the front office and the back office, for many years, ladies and gentlemen, involves somebody inventing a product, developing it, selling it, thinking it's a great idea, possibly even trading it, and then somebody saying, well, how are we going to settle this? Well, the way in which you settled it in the past is to go through the door into the back office and shout a lot. Now, that's hardly the right way to do things. Because when you shout a lot, somebody in the back office who probably hasn't been to university, probably hasn't spent an enormous amount of time studying and thinking and reading and doing all those things, because he's been working at actually how the process itself works, and now knows how to settle your product. And that may involve doing a swap through a system in Panama, and it may then involve doing a back-to-back with a system in Hong Kong, and taking some collateral from an Australian system, etc., 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 until you deliver the right result. And that's fine, because quite often these products work for a while and then the front office team sugar off, or somebody doesn't believe them anymore, usually the latter. But after a little while, the guy in the back office, or the people in the back office, have forgotten what it was that they did, ladies and gentlemen, to put the patch in, to make that settlement occur. And that's all very well and good, till about 5 years later, a regulator somewhere in, let us say, Panama, polls up and says, could you show me your, XYZ system? And they say, yeah, here it is. They say, yeah, well, that's fantastic. You've got 20,000 records on here for which you have got complete documentation, no problem at all, you've done a great job. But you've got 43 million records on here that have come from all over the world with no documentation. Oh, I didn't know about that. No, of course you didn't know about it, because somebody in a back office somewhere else was using your system to do these pass-throughs and back-to-backs. Was it ever documented? No. What does the regulator do? Ka-ching, ka-ching, very large fine, thank you very much. Now, the point is that provability, the point is that being able to show where that came from, what basis it came there, etc., 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 automating the process of KYC, automating your processes of AML, will do two things. First of all, it will cut your costs dramatically in the front office. But you know what? It will cut the costs as well of regulatory fines. And how much have big banks paid in regulatory fines since the financial crisis? I believe it's now about $400 billion. And it hasn't stopped. I mean, there was another big one the other day. So, getting away from being fined for doing things and reducing your costs, what's the not to like from the
DLT.
corner office?
But what you're talking about is just replicating the existings and using the existing processes and making the technology improve the quality of the processes and the timing of the processes. I think that DLT has the potential to completely disrupt the market. And we certainly see that because we also working with other industries where who have maybe been a little bit further ahead than financial markets and have completely started to disrupt the way they do business by leveraging the technology to improve their processes and fundamentally change their processes. And we're now seeing that approach coming in to financial markets and certainly seeing a lot of changes, especially in the payment space, especially in the trade finance space, especially in the FX space, where clients will now start, or banks will now start to understand much, much better why a corporate client will make a payment, why a corporate client will make an FX transaction, when they need to have a financing transaction. And by having that better understanding, you started changing the way you do business by providing much more customized services to your clients.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's all very true, Simon. I mean, there's lots and lots and lots of examples of this sort of thing. But fundamentally, the biggest opportunity for finance, which hasn't ever been really grasped, is the very, very simple thing of turning your customers into your unpaid employees, because that's what happens in most other industries. But we haven't done that yet in finance.
But
DLT achieves that.
That's exactly the point I'm making.
Let's assume we all buy into
happening.
this.
We do.
The difficulty is, of course, is having one use case out there that everybody can point towards to actually say, this is where it's actually been implemented, and we've actually seen it in progress, and now we all believe that it works. Up until now, it was pie in the sky. So maybe that's a good point to pass over to you, Chris, with respect to your current project in Australia, because I would suggest that that is one of these fundamental moments where how that actually gets implemented is probably one of the turning points as to where DLT goes in the future.
I think that's probably true, but just want to pick up on a couple of points that Peter made. I don't believe we're at the top of the hype cycle. I think we're in the trough of disillusionment at the moment. I think there's so many people who are like, oh my God, do I have to talk more about DLT? When's it actually going to happen? When am I going to see the results of it? So I actually think we're in the bottom of the bottom of that curve. Was there too much hype? Absolutely. Was there a lot of stuff where people were just talking untruths? Absolutely. And I would probably say that the ASX example, the Australian Securities Exchange example, contributed to that hype. Because a few years ago they came out and said, we're going to switch out a systemically consequential piece of technology called CHESS for clearing and settlement of cash equities, and we're going to use this thing called DLT. And all some people thought, well, if they're doing it, then everybody else should be doing it. And then there were a bunch of proof of concepts being done by a bunch of market infrastructure, a bunch of banks. Everybody thought, oh, it's all going to happen tomorrow. But it didn't, because this stuff is not easy. So on the one hand, I think there was obviously way too much hype. There is some reality, though. And before I get into the ASX thing, I just wanted to touch on Peter's point about price. And the prices must come down, and this is transformational, disruptive. the prices are coming down. Why are the prices coming down? The prices are coming down because of the point, not because of the point I made earlier, but linked to the point I made earlier, which is that the big guys are coming into this. Microsoft, Google, Amazon, IBM, Salesforce, the list goes on, Dell, VMware. And why are they coming to this? They're coming to this because they think it's transformational. But so why are the prices coming down? Because we all like to make money. They're all, capitalistic firms. The reason that the prices are coming down is because they want to control what's called platform economics. They want to have control of the platform. And I don't think it'll be a loss leader situation. I think that, pick a VMware, for example, Dell Corporation. They'll run this with a healthy margin, but maybe it's only 5 or 10% margin. Why will they do that, and why will they be able to sustain the business? Because they've got massive scale. That's one reason, and a massive customer base to sell into. But the real reason is that they want to, control that platform, because like IBM, like Amazon, they've got a bunch of other services which are much higher value that they want to sell to you. So the prices of DLT will come down. The platform will absolutely come down, and already it is. I mean, I'm very familiar with some of the pricing. Look at the pricing that's out there. It's gone from here down to here. So yes, there's too much hype. I think we're in the trough of disillusionment. This is transformational, but by the way, those prices are coming down, which is one of those barriers to getting going and for people moving forward. Another one that I mentioned was this optionality and choice. Am I buying myself into being locked into a vendor, or am I buying myself into something I'm not locked in, but I don't, well, maybe I'm not locked into a particular vendor, but I don't have a choice of getting away from it. So now to your specific question about the ASX. ASX is market infrastructure, systemically consequential. Why did they do this? Why did they take the risk of doing this? And Peter Hyam, who many of the panelists know here, he was on the stage, he'd say, because I couldn't afford not to take the risk. Because this technology is clearly emerging, we put these systems in, they last for at least a decade, if not longer. Do I really want to buy myself into a platform that doesn't have legs? And way of looking at that, everybody in this room probably remembers a Walkman, right? Who had a Walkman? I had a yellow Walkman, right? And when I had a Walkman, it was the best thing since sliced bread. Then along came this guy, Steve Jobs, and he brought out this thing called an iPod. It was a little bit better than a Walkman, because you could, for all the reasons that you know. But the reason that the iPod became the iPhone 10. And just as when Peter's looking at replacing his clearing and settlement system with a blockchain, the functionality and the benefits that the Australian community is going to get day one is good. It's not profound, just like when you went to an iPod. It wasn't profound, it was good, but it gave you a platform on which to evolve. So the reason that the ASX went with this is because they could see this was transformational technology. It would give them, and more importantly their end customers, some advantages, but it's all about what it will do in the future, just as the iPhone 10 does the things that way surpassed the dreams of the initial invention of the iPod. So yes, it is systemically consequential, yes, it's going to happen, but it's a long time in happening. It's not going live until 2021. A lot of people say to me, why is it taking so long? And the answer is because it ain't easy. And if you were to just take traditional, old-fashioned technology from, let's say, an exchange vendor who vends exchange technology, you'd have a 4 or 5 year project. Well, that's what this is. So it's taking a while because it's just difficult and hard to do. It's taking a while because it is new technology. The good news is that it is on track. It will deliver in Q1 of 2021, and already, instead of there being hype, when is it going to happen? You can, if you're a practitioner in that marketplace, access the technology through the ASX has this thing called the CDE, their client development environment. You can jump into that and you can start playing with it. And actually, one of the reasons it's not going live until 2021 is partly because the market participants said, you know what, we've got to do a bunch of testing, etc., etc. You may be ready earlier than that. In fact, they were ready to go earlier than that. And the market participants said, just give us a bit more time for testing. But yeah, it's systemically consequential, and it is going to happen, and it will bring benefits, and it will be a milestone in the evolution of this technology.
We'll allow Peter a brief retort, because I can see he's chewing at the bit there. looking at time,
Okay, all
it has
right,
to
real
be
quick,
brief.
real quick. The ASX have stated publicly that they do not expect that the $100 million of revenues that they take out of clearing and settlement will fall at all. In fact, they think that that is going to rise over the next 3 years. That's the first point. The second point is that the brokerage community in Australia has pushed back extremely hard about the idea that they've got to have their own distributed ledger node provided by Chris's firm within the Australian Liquidity Centre at a cost of $250,000. The broker-dealer community said, no, we're not doing that. So the ASX have now gone to VMware, where the cost of actually connecting to the new system is, guess what, $8,000. Hooray, happy days, it's all wonderful. So costs not cut at all, except for the difference between the 250 and the 8,000, and ASX revenues still very, very sound. So actually, when you really unpick a lot of this is not so much about actually thinking 5, 10, 15, 20 years in the future. I put it to you, ladies and gentlemen. This is about the actual sociology of what went on back in the day when a few improbably named people, the then leader of the Australian Stock Exchange, who I won't name at this point, but improbable name, got together with the head of the Australian regulator and got together with Clive from Digital. And guess where they'd all been before? They'd all been at JP Morgan. Oh, that's interesting, isn't it? So their deal was done. The price wasn't agreed. I believe that the price that's been paid already is up over $250 million. To replace a settlement system, $250 million. That's nuts. I'll tell you why I know it's nuts, because we built Chi-X for $25 million, and we saw, almost immediately afterwards, we saw a request from the Tokyo Stock Exchange. The Tokyo Stock Exchange, ladies and gentlemen,
Peter,
came in for $250 million for the whole thing.
it is an iPod.
It was an iPod. It was.
So
Elmer Funk Coupe was the name of the gentleman.
we've unfortunately run out of time. I'm sure that the gentleman will be here at the coffee break for you to ask questions. I wouldn't even ask for any questions because the answers will take far too long. So it just remains for me to thank our panellists for obviously enlightening us on this